Hello, welcome to Claire's Food Haven, and it's another Mum's Mondays. It's still pretty miserable outside. We've got another storm here, and we're hoping that we're not going to have another power cut. So today we're going to make pesto from basil leaves, and then we're going to use the pesto to make a crust on top of cod, and then we're going to bake the cod in the air fryer. I hope you enjoy that. Homemade pesto is so much nicer than bought pesto and so easy to make. But just before we get started on the pesto, I just thought I'd give you a little update on the apples. Remember the apple pips that sprouted in the pink ladies that we used to make the apple cake a while ago? Even though it's the middle of winter, nearly the end of February, they're still hanging in there. Remember, I put some moss on the top to try to keep them moist. They're looking a bit leggy and not that happy, but I'm quite optimistic that if we can get them through another month, we should be able to get them into the greenhouse and get something like. So hopefully the apples are going to be a success. You might notice that there's more. I've got 4 little plants now, and I started off with 2. The next time we made apple cake, we found another couple of pips sprouting, so I popped those in as well. So they're still going strong. Right. So the ingredients for the pesto are a pot of basil that we bought from the supermarket. This time of year there isn't that much on a basil plant, but there should be enough here for the dish that we want to make. And then some pine nuts. We'll need about a mittful of pine nuts. And then we'll need some Parmesan cheese, which is freshly grated, a mittful of Parmesan cheese. And then we'll need maybe a little bit of lemon juice and so a drizzle of olive oil. It's difficult to give quantities because it kind of varies, so we'll decide that as we go along. And then when we get to the cod crust, after we've made the pesto in the food processor, we'll make some breadcrumbs in the same food processor, and then we'll mix that with the basil to pop on top of the cod. So that's the ingredients. So first thing to do is to get the leaves off the basil. So try to avoid the stalks. So pluck off the centres and take off the big leaves. And pop those into a bowl. Oh, it's smelling lovely already. I love the smell of basil. You could do it with a knife as well. I'm just trying to avoid stalks and also avoiding any leaves that look a little bit browned. We just want the nice looking leaves. So that should be just enough basil for what we want to do for a dish for 2 people. Next thing to do is to put the pine nuts in the food processor and mix them with some salt and give them a whiz. You need to watch it with pine nuts. They're quite expensive and they don't keep their freshness, so always check your date. These are okay till April, but don't think that if you keep them in the cupboard it doesn't really matter. They start to take on a flavour of kind of staleness if you use them when they're over, so only buy what you need. So that's a mittful of pine nuts. It's probably going to be enough. And now some salt. This is sea salt. So I'm going to grind this 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That should be enough salt. And the salt helps with the grinding process of the pine nuts. So here we go. I'll have a look. They're still a bit too coarse for what we want. I'll let them go for a bit longer. Now, having a look, most of them are pretty finely ground now to a powder, but some of them are still a bit coarse, and that's good for what we want for the pesto. You want a bit of texture in there. So next we put the basil leaves in. And grind it again. So that's broken up the basil leaves, but now we need to introduce a bit of oil and parmesan to get the texture that we want. So now I'm going to add a mittful of parmesan. A little bit more. And a little squirt of lemon juice. Not much lemon juice, so I only took the end off it. That might be enough. You can always add more, you can't take it out. Give it another whiz. It isn't extra virgin olive oil, ordinary olive oil is all right for this. I could hear by the sound of that it sounded slightly more liquid. It's pretty stiff, but for this dish that we're making for the crust for the cod, we want it on the stiffer side. If you were using your pesto for a pasta sauce, you might want it a little bit thinner. So it's up to you how much oil you put in. And I can see that there's still some oil on the bottom, so I'm going to give it another whiz because I think it hasn't quite finished amalgamating. So it's still on the thick side, so I'm going to keep adding a little drizzle of oil and hopefully we'll be there soon. Much more towards the consistency that we want now. So I think that'll be fine. I'm going to take it out of there and put it in a bowl. But we haven't finished with the food processor yet because we're going to zizz the breadcrumbs in it, and that's a handy way of starting to clean it, so that's good. And we get more flavour out of the basil that way as well. Well, it smells fantastic. So without bothering to wash the food processor, we'll get straight on and whiz the bread, leaving the crusts on. This is Alan's homemade bread. One of them is a crust of a loaf. It doesn't matter if it's stale bread. This has been frozen and thawed, so it's a really handy way of using up bread as well. And that's the bread in there, and now just turn it into pesto-y breadcrumbs. I'll give it another zizz. So they're okay. There's still a few bits of crusty, coarse looking bread in there, but that will add some texture to what we're doing. So I'll pop those in a bowl now. They've taken on that green tinge from the pesto, which is nice. So that's the two key ingredients for our crust. You could use the pesto crust on salmon as well. We quite often use it on salmon. And in fact, this is the first time we've done it on cod. So it's a little bit of an experiment. Hopefully it will be as good. So we're ready to assemble the fish and the topping. So I've taken the 2 pieces of cod fillet out of the packet and dried them well with kitchen paper. And then I've taken the skin off the bottom, so they're ready for the toppings. First of all, I'm going to sprinkle them both with salt. Just the top side. And now I'm going to put the pesto on. I've mixed the pesto up because the oil was starting to show at the sides again. I think that's going to be about right. Spread it out. Give it a good coating. As I can. And now I'm going to give each one a coating of breadcrumbs. That's fine. And now a little sprinkling of parmesan. Great, now these are ready for the air fryer. Now I'm going to switch on the air fryer and we'll be cooking these pieces of cod with pesto topping for 10 minutes on 200 degrees. That's the timer just finished. That's good. Just taking the plates out of the oven. So now I'm going to probe the fish, see if it's done. Stick the probe into the thickest part. 60. But the other one is 68, so the other one was a bit thinner, so I'm going to take one out and pop the other one in for another minute. There we are. There we are. I'm going to pop this in the oven just to keep it warm. That's the trouble with supermarket fish. You have to get what you're given, and that was one thinner than the other. They weren't uniform pieces. So the fish has had another minute, and I'll give it another probe, and hopefully it's come up to 63, which is the temperature we're looking for. Oh, well over this time, 69 in fact. So we're there. So that's the second piece of fish. Ready? The first one out. And now I'll plate up. Got some tomato sauce here, which is a story for another day. Some broccoli. And some mash. There we are. And some tomato sauce. Just because otherwise it would be a bit dry. So that's the pesto crusted cod with mash, broccoli and tomato sauce. I hope you've enjoyed watching it, and I hope you enjoy making it if you give it a go. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing and liking.